Hey guys, it's White Cross, and today we are going to do the second video in our 999 Silver Advanced series for bars. If you've watched the advanced videos, you know that we started with those coin or coin-shaped items, those rounds, those medals, those coins, and then we moved on to bars, and we just did a video on the 1-ounce bars. Hopefully you had a chance to see that. If not, please go back and take a look at it. And now we're going to do bars that are larger than 1 ounce but smaller than a kilo. So mostly we're going to be focusing on the 10-ounce bars. A quick note, I do think that 10-ounce bars are one of the best values. They are one of the best vehicles for people who are interested in investing in physical precious metals. I try not to give any advice, so don't think of that as really advice. It's just more of a suggestion to look into it. 10-ounce bars typically smaller premiums than a 1-ounce vehicle like a Silver Eagle, but they're also in an amount of silver that can easily be liquidated without causing too much trouble for the average stacker. So, in my opinion, 10-ounce bars, some of the best vehicles out there. As we've started in the past, let me just give you a quick disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to give you financial advice. I'm just trying to share my experience doing this for the last 3 or 4 decades. If you've made this decision to have physical precious metals in your portfolio, in your collection, however you view it, I'm just trying to offer some suggestions for people who are interested in going a little bit deeper than the typical generic 10-ounce silver bar or rolls of Silver Eagles or Maples or Philharmonics. If you're interested in something that's a little bit more in-depth and a little bit more historically interesting, physically attractive and interesting, with at least the potential for some kind of gain beyond the value of the silver, that's kind of what the focus of this series of videos is. If you've watched these videos before, or if you're joining me for the first time, I really appreciate it. I would like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. That's one of the ways that the videos get seen, and that's one of the ways that YouTube fits you into their algorithms for promoting videos. So just click on the subscribe button down below, and if you like the content, I appreciate a like or a comment too. It lets me know that I'm doing the right things for the people who are interested in learning more about these topics. As we've done in the past, I want to start with a couple of expressions, terms, usable bits of information that kind of go beyond the individual video content. And in the past, I've thrown out a couple of terms that I have used as I have done my own physical precious metals building. And I want to keep that going with this video before we get into the meat of these really awesome looking silver bars here. A couple of things I wanted to touch on that kind of work into this type of silver bullion. And the first one is authenticity. This is kind of a strange situation, a strange time for people who like silver bullion, because the silver bullion market has kind of crested that ridge between the value of the bar, the intrinsic value of the silver. For example, this is 10 troy ounces of 0.999 pure silver, but this bar is worth more than the 10 troy ounce 0.999 silver content, even above the premium. Recall that premium is the amount that the seller charges beyond the price of the metal contained within. These bars have collector value, and it's that collector value that I wanted to touch on with the term authenticity. I had the privilege recently of picking up a W.H. Foster silver bar, a 1-ounce poured bar. Those who collect silver and who are very knowledgeable in this field, and I appreciate there are people who know so much more than I know in this field, especially when it comes to the older poured bars, will recognize the Foster name. For a lot of people, it's a holy grail silver bar. They were one of the first companies that really made small silver bars for the consumer. We're talking 1960s. They were very far ahead of the game. I came across a Foster bar at a local dealer who had no idea what it was. I didn't know for sure that it was what I thought it was, but it was certainly worth the risk. And this is one of the things that I bring up periodically, is if you see something you haven't seen before and you've been at it for a while, I call that Tom's Law. The longer you have been at this, and you see something that you've never seen before, it will probably take you about that much longer to see that item again. I call that Tom's Law. And we'll touch on Tom's Law when we get a little bit deeper into numismatics in future videos. So I picked up this Foster bar and I took it home and I was examining it and I was marveling at the value that these bars go for. A Foster bar, a 1 ounce Foster bar, can often go in the hundreds and hundreds of dollars, even up to the thousands of dollars for just a 1 ounce silver poured bar. And it occurred to me while I was looking at it, with the proliferation of people who have been pouring silver bars, we talked about in the last video the difference between a poured bar, P-O-U-R-E-D bar, versus an extruded or a milled or a minted silver bar. So many people have been picking up that hobby of making poured bars that it occurred to me that it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to duplicate a bar like the Foster bar. It's an old poured bar with kind of very basic symbols on it. And the authenticity of a product like that made me question whether or not pieces like that could be copied, could be counterfeited. And I mentioned briefly in one of the earliest videos that I did here that I do think that the third-party graders will slowly move towards slabbing or encapsulating rare bullion. And in fact, they've already started doing that to an extent. But that was one of the things that I wanted to bring up. Authenticity. If you are chasing these really rare early silver vehicles, at what point do you hit your comfort level for something that could be counterfeited without the ability to check a website like PCGS or NGC or Numisma? How do you know that what you're buying is authentic? And there have been some recent inauthentic bars, and I believe the brand is Homestake. You can look it up on allengelhard.com. I'll put a link below, where people are making inauthentic, counterfeit bars. Now, the silver content of those bars is accurate. The weight is accurate, and the purity is accurate. And this goes to what I was talking about, how it's become a strange period of time where the value of the silver is not in question, but the value of some of these silver bars can be multiples of the silver contained within. So at what point do you feel comfortable buying a bar that purports to be something that is authentic and has some age to it if you're not 100% positive? I'll touch on that kind of idea when we talk about gold in particular. The fewer examples that you have available, the more difficult it is to gauge authenticity. And with some of these very rare early bullion products, there just aren't very many examples out there. And you can see the problem in that equation. Without lots of definitely authentic examples to compare pieces to, it gets to be that much more difficult to find something that could be inauthentic. Keep that in mind. Authenticity and your personal comfort level. At what point is it worth it to you to pay a premium to try to get something that could be more valuable, older, more scarce? You have to be the one that makes that determination. You have to be the one that makes that decision about authenticity and your comfort level. So just a couple of quick ideas and thoughts that I wanted to put into your head as we go deeper into this. Again, there are people who have so much more knowledge in this field than I do. I think it's a fascinating field, and I'm really, really glad that there are people out there who study this even more than I do. I wanted to give a shout out to, obviously, allengelhard.com. Of course, I've referenced them before. I think they're fantastic. VintageSilver.com is another website that has a pretty good depth knowledge when it comes to these older poured type bars. And one site that I came across recently that has just blown me away is VintagePouredBar.com. And I'll leave a link to all three of those down below. But if you have any interest in a really, really deep dive into these older, much more scarce bullion products, by all means dig deeper into it. I think it's fascinating. Their information is really well presented. And it's lovely to have this type of information available at your fingertips. If you found the videos that I've done helpful, by all means check out these websites. You'll find them at least as helpful and probably much more so. Which brings me to my first bar that I wanted to talk about. Remember, in this video, we're doing bars that are greater than 1 ounce, but smaller than a kilo. So mostly that's 2 to 3 to 10 troy ounce bar. And this is a really interesting example of one that I wanted to bring about because, in particular, because of that conversation about authenticity. There is a precedence for both PCGS and NGC slabbing, encapsulating small bars. For those of you who know the 9/11 coins, the coins that came out of the bank vaults at the bottom of, not the Twin Towers, but one of the buildings that was directly related to it, there were large stashes of precious metals in the form of coins and bars, and those are called 9/11 recovery coins or bars. And not everybody likes those. I understand that there's an emotional kind of aspect to that, and some people think that it's a little bit morbid. Again, I'm coming from a coin collecting field, so for me, it was an ability to draw a direct connection to what the events that happened at 9/11. So I do have one of those World Trade Center recovered silver eagles in my collection. But this is an example of a bar that was slabbed by NGC. PCGS actually slabbed some of the smaller gold bars that were recovered from the 9/11 catastrophe, and this is an example of a bar that was slabbed by NGC. This is a Manilal Chamanlal bar of Bombay, India. It's kind of a unique bar from India. These have started appearing on the market with a little bit more frequency. I've noticed several of them for sale recently, and they range in size from a 5 tola bar up to about a 100 tola bar, I think. Tola, T-O-L-A, is an Indian and Southeast Asian weight system, kind of like troy ounces. A tola is equal to 11.66 grams, so there are about 3/8 of an ounce, a troy ounce per tola. This is a 5 tola silver bar, so it weighs about 1.9 troy ounces. So there's a precedence with NGC and PCGS actually encapsulating these bars. This is, let me see if I can get a nice focus on it. See how thick and chunky this bar is. It's a nice thick slab too. So this is something that was made in the 1950s, maybe 1960s. They're not dated, but we feel that's when it happened. And again, this is an example of a bar that NGC is slabbed. With that question of authenticity, I feel that the market is ready for slabbing of these smaller bullion pieces. And if you're a coin collector, you've seen the GSA Morgan dollar packs that are slabbed by NGC. They leave the coins in the original GSA packs, but they put a band around them. I think you could probably do that with some of the larger, earlier silver bars. I'd love to encourage NGC and PCGS to take on this type of slabbing, and I've actually written to PCGS and asked them to do it. But enough about that. This is just an interesting, slightly larger than 1 ounce silver bar if you are interested in going a little bit deeper into these more advanced topics of larger 999 silver bars. Here's an interesting one from JM. This is the National Bank of Commerce, Seattle. So this is a bar that was made by Johnson Matthey in London for a bank in Seattle. Nice thickness to this one too. This is a pretty scarce bar. They only made about 1,000 of these. You can find them occasionally. I've had this one for probably 10 years or so. We know that the Commerce Bank changed its name to Rainier Bank in 1974, so I would date this maybe not quite that early, but it seems odd that they would have continued with that name. 1975-ish, something in that area. It's an interesting piece to have, and as you know, I'm a big fan of Johnson Matthey, so of course I wanted some things that were a little bit more unusual. We've talked a little bit about 5-ounce silver bars in the past. 5-ounce silver bars used to be one of my favorite vehicles when I was a teenager, when I was really starting to stack back in the 1980s. And they don't seem to be as common as they used to be. I think that's a little bit sad, but again, I do think that 10 troy-ounce silver bars make a lot of sense for most stackers. So I've got a few pieces that I was able to get from a local dealer probably 10 or 12 years ago. These look like a standard Silvertowne 5-ounce silver bar, and that's kind of what they are, but these are actually quite old and quite scarce. If you are a poured bar collector, you'll immediately recognize these. as the second and third series ever offered by Silvertowne. These are quite old, mid-1970s, so they are approaching somewhere around 50 years in age. 5 troy-ounce bars. This one is the second series. This one is the third series. This is a good reminder of that authenticity term that I talked about earlier. Silvertowne continues to make poured type bars. Again, so much interest has come about in the last 10 or 12 years that a lot of manufacturers are making those old pour type bars that are not old. They're making them now. Again, allengelhard.com calls those a retro, and I think that's a good term. These are the authentic early versions, but Silvertowne does make modern versions of that. So again, where is your comfort level? How much do you know? How much knowledge do you need in order to spring for these higher premiums that can come along with these older bars, with the knowledge that you have to be careful about whether or not something is authentic and old or made recently. Let's go to 10-ounce bars. If you are a fan of Engelhard like I am, you know these bars immediately. These are the old Engelhard Old Pour 10th series with the P prefix. There's that P that begins the serial number there. One of my all-time favorite bars. These were everywhere when I was a kid, and I picked them up whenever I could. And when I really got back involved in buying again in the late 1980s, early 1990s, dealers couldn't give these away. I was paying $100 a piece for these silver bars at the time, and that was including the premium along with it, because everybody wanted the new flashy, shiny poured bars like these ones over here, or the extruded bars rather. So I thought that these were neat, they were nostalgic, and I picked up dozens of them, and I still have dozens and dozens in my personal precious metals holdings. This is a good entree if you're thinking about getting into these older poured bars. There's a lot of information about them out, and you can see what makes them authentic and what makes them desirable. In my experience, these 10th series Engelhard bars always run just a little bit heavy, and I love that. I love the idea that you're getting just a little bit more than 10 troy ounces in a bar form. This is the MidTier bar from Engelhard. Sometimes people call this a pillow bar, and you can see they do resemble the poured bars quite a bit. But they're not. These are more of a milled product, where these were actually poured into a form. These were milled and stamped. So this is kind of a medium series, mid-tier, 1983. While Engelhard made 50,000 of these bars, they made at least 200,000 of these pillow bars, called a pillow because they kind of almost look like a pillow. They're a nice bar too, and I've got plenty of those. I don't like them quite as much as the earlier series. Sometimes people can confuse these two, and if you're new to it, take a good look at that video, go back and rewind it and look at them very slowly. There are distinct differences between the two, and you don't want to pay the premium associated with the old pour bar if what you're buying is a pillow bar. There's nothing wrong with the pillows. I like them, but I just don't think they're quite as interesting, and they don't seem to command quite as much of a premium as the older poured bars do. Mid-tier bar. Another one. This is an example of an Engelhard 10-ounce bar, and this one's still in vinyl. I collected in vinyl back in the day, and most of my pieces are still in the original vinyl. This one is a 12th series bar. Engelhard made about 125,000 of them, so it was still a relatively scarce bar, and it's still a pretty old bar. You're talking about 1985 maybe, and this was the last of that horizontal bar before they went with the vertical style, and I'll touch on those really quickly. Again, just some examples of these older, slightly more interesting 10-ounce options that you might have: the old pour bars, the pillow bars, these horizontal bars in plastic, and then this is the bar that most people know when you're talking about an Engelhard 10-ounce silver bar. I love these bars too, and I've got plenty of them. I'm a big fan of them. This was kind of the standard for quite a while. And then this became, I think, the last series that Engelhard released, and obviously it's a little bit more flashy, a little bit more polished, a little bit more modern looking. Still, those are older bars now. Remember, Engelhard stopped making consumer products right about the time that Silver Eagles were released, late 1980s. So by the 1990s, Engelhard really wasn't even producing very many products. Here's another example of those MTB bars or coins that I'm always talking about. You know that I have a pretty deep collection of these. This is that Manfred Tordella and Brooks piece from New York City. MTB was a company that provided large amounts of silver, and still does, to foreign countries and big corporations who want physical silver for whatever reason. And this is obviously their Statue of Liberty, but you can see right there, there is the E hallmark for Engelhard. This one dated 1985, I believe it says there. So an older bar, a more interesting bar. They only made about 7,500 of these, and you can find them. They're not as super scarce, but they're interesting enough that I like having that piece in my collection. And then I want to touch really briefly on Johnson Matthey, obviously. If you've got 10-ounce silver bars from JM, you'll recognize that style immediately. That was kind of their typical bar for quite a while too. And here's an example of a slightly more scarce, a slightly more interesting Johnson Matthey. This is the Republic National Bank of New York bar. This was made by JM, and you can see the JM assayers and refiners there for the Republic National Bank of New York, probably mid-1980s. They made about 3,000 of these. So good examples of slightly more interesting bars. Engelhard for MTB, Johnson Matthey for the Republic National Bank of New York. Some interesting options, some interesting ideas if you're looking at going a little bit deeper into silver bars, if you're interested in those slightly more than 1 ounce but less than a kilo. These are all great options, interesting pieces to pick up. My favorites probably these Engelhard bars, but anytime you've got the original pieces from the 1980s still in their vinyl sleeves, I'm a big fan, and you can see why. To recap really quickly, the topics that we talked about on this video: authenticity. If you're gonna go for the deeper stuff, you're gonna go for the older stuff, are you positive what you're buying is authentic? Just because it looks really good doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So if you're gonna stack this type of item in your collection, do your research first. Don't make a mistake and then try to peddle your way out of it. Really examine what the dimensions are, the characteristics, the tells of those older pour bars. Go to vintagesilver.com. Go to vintagepouredbar.com. Go to allengelhard.com. Go back and look at some of my earlier videos, especially the videos about bars, to really arm yourself with the information that you need to make those right decisions. And then again, the comfort level. Only you can decide at what point you feel comfortable shelling out larger amounts of money for pieces that are older, when, as you know, a 10-ounce silver bar in a lot of terms is still a 10-ounce silver bar. Is it worth paying 2 or 3 or 4 times the value of the silver, or even more for some specialty bars, just to get one more 10-ounce bar in your collection? For me, I love the older bars. I love finding the more obscure items, but it really comes down to getting these at very close to the value of the precious metals. That's what excites me. Writing a big check for a very rare piece rarely makes me as happy as finding an interesting piece in the wild and being able to add that to your collection, knowing that you got something a little bit more special and a little bit more deeper. If you like this video, again, please, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. I mentioned in the last video that I shot that we were right about 100 subscribers. By the time you see this video, we should be well over 200 subscribers, and I genuinely appreciate that. The idea that the information that I'm providing to people is being found to be useful is a thrilling thing, and it makes me want to keep on making more of these videos. And I've got so many different topics that I'd still like to cover before we draw to a close. The more subscribers I get, the more encouragement I'm going to find to go deeper and deeper into this journey with you. So if you find this information useful, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. By all means, leave a comment down below, and I'll try to respond to that as quickly as I can. As always, if there are topics that you'd like to see me cover, leave a comment there about that, and I will look into my knowledge base and see if I've got the product and the ability to come up with a topic or a video that matches what you need that could be helpful. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.